not understanding who they are and what their potential is the way I didn't understand mine. So I became a teacher, was successful, went on to become an assistant principal and then a principal at Blaine Elementary School. Was very successful there. And I'm going to go back to some of the biographical parts of that later when I get into why I think this campaign and this candidate is the most qualified by far in the field, including the one currently in charge. So we're going to revisit that. But I want to jump right into one element of my career that sticks out to me. And that was being an assistant principal in North Lawndale, the poorest neighborhood in the city. And then moving to become a principal at Blaine, the wealthiest residential neighborhood in the city. Can you imagine what I've seen? I've seen that tale of two cities that this man claims doesn't exist. And one thing that I saw that stays in my head is day one of kindergarten and the difference. Because my kids at Johnson walked into school on day one of kindergarten, years behind my kids at Blaine. Years behind my kids at Blaine. And years behind my kids at Blaine. That's the teacher principal in me like, what you doing? Most folks let that go. That principal in me like, how do you know? So they're years behind. And it's day one of kindergarten. And Johnson is supposed to be, because they're behind, Johnson is supposed to be a failing school. How Johnson failed the kids and they've never been to a school? It's day one of kindergarten. They've been failed long before they ever reached the school system. Long before. Who failed them? They were failed by the alderman. They were failed by their state representative. They were failed by a business community that didn't create the kind of jobs in that community that are available for those parents in Lakeview so that they can have the kind of income to expose their children to the things that stimulate cognitive development the way those kids in Lakeview were. They're failed by the fact that in Lincoln Park or Lakeview, you have a 0% chance of being exposed to lead paint as a child. You know what your chances are in Austin or North Lawndale? 1 in 4. 1 out of every 4. And so those kids end up having the cognitive, showing up on day one of kindergarten with those cognitive deficits because they've been failed by all of those institutions. And even if you say they've been failed by the family, what is our responsibility to make sure the parents get what they need to provide the cognitively stimulating environment that's necessary? Even when you blame the parents, you got to come back to us and say, well, how do we as a society make sure those kids get everything they need, no matter what income level household their kids are born into? It always comes back to us. Right? And so as a principal, I'm looking at this, and remember, I didn't become a teacher because I wanted to become a teacher. I became a teacher because I wanted to ensure people lived up to their God-given potential. My goal was not to be a teacher. My goal was live up to potential. And so I'm looking at all of these obstacles that are in the way of me helping these kids live up to their potential. As a principal, what can I do about lead paint? But as a mayor, as a principal, what can I do to make economic opportunity and jobs available to the folks in this community and invest in this community? But as a mayor, as a principal, what can I do about the violence these young people are and their families and their communities are exposed to that leave them with trauma that they bring in? But as a mayor, y'all see where I'm going here. That I can help these children and the families and communities they come from all live up to their God-given potential far more in the office of mayor than the office that I was in. Am I making sense here? And so what I like to say to folks is this. I'm running for mayor of Chicago because Chicago does not have a mayor.
That's right.
I'm running for mayor of Chicago because Chicago does not have a mayor. The bankers have a mayor. The real estate developers have a mayor. The venture and vulture capitalists who want to privatize our school system, they have a mayor. But everyday people who want a safe neighborhood, an exceptional school to send their children to, economic opportunity, they don't have a mayor. And I'm running so that I can help work with you to build a movement that gives all of us a mayor. And so, for example, I got people who want safe neighborhoods, don't have a mayor. Safe neighborhood is not, who in here believes that it is impossible to create safe neighborhoods in Chicago? And yet we don't have it. Who in here knows, by show of hands, that there are steps we can take to reduce the violence in our neighborhoods through smart, comprehensive investments? You know it and I know it. But we don't have a mayor who'll do it for you because he's not your mayor. I'm making sense here. I was talking to a brother just before I got here. I was over in Ogden Park in Inglewood, which was the community I was born into. I remember we were chatting, and we were talking about the old days of Ogden Park when they used to have the rocket slide. I don't know who was. I remember the rocket slide that they took. I was so disappointed when they took the rocket slide down. And he said, you know, chaos reigns when there's no communication. Chaos reigns when there's no communication. And he was talking about, he's a violence interrupter. And one of the things he does is puts rival factions into constant communication with one another, because many of the things that normally end up creating situations where people end up dead can be killed, for lack of a better way to put it, or taken out or resolved by putting people in communication with one another. I saw this when I was at social justice high school. We had the 2-6 and the GDs. And we created a program where 2-3 times a week during lunch, we had violence interrupters come in to talk about things that have been going on the street. Right? To keep them in communication with one another so misunderstandings or slight offenses could be addressed in conversation. Not an incident in 2 years because of this communication. Right? If we had a city that invested, this is just one example. You all raised your hands because you know things could be done. That's just one of about 50 different things that can be done to reduce violence that this administration has no commitment to whatsoever. Right? We know it can be done. I was talking to Damon right here. He said, Troy, and again, that's not my idea. And people look at it like, what's your idea for reducing violence? My idea is that there have been people who've been dealing with violence, people who've been dealing with education, people who've been dealing with economic investment longer than I've been alive. Right here in our city, the brilliance that we need exists right here in our city. We don't need to import it in. It's right here. We need to cultivate and develop it. That guy, the gentleman that said chaos reigns when there's no communication, just got out of a 19-year prison stint. And now he's a violence interrupter. Right? We're going to get the solutions and the wisdom from folk like him, folk like the folk at the Greater Chatham Alliance, the folks at the Logan Square Neighborhood Association. The brilliance that we need to solve our city's problems exists right here among the people of our city. Am I making sense here? Yes. Right? Applaud the people of our city. And so the point is, we don't have a mayor committee. 74 shootings, 12 murders, 0 arrests, $1.5 billion police budget. Let me say that again. 74 shootings, 12 of those murders on the weekend. 0 arrests, $1.5 billion police budget. You mean to tell me there's not a way we can invest that $1.5 billion to create a completely different kind of community-centered policing and investment strategy? Who believes we can't do that? Who believes we can? I'm one of you. But we don't have access to City Hall right now. You put me in there, we become mayor, and we begin to implement the ideas that solve Chicago's violence problem. Right? Violence is pretty simple. Right? We make sure that kids get everything they need from 0 to 5, from birth to 5, to succeed in school. We give them an exceptional education system with the kind of education that Ron's kids get at the lab school, where they learn a foreign language from 3rd through 8th grade, where they take documentary film production, where they get a rich civics education. Who's going to get that kind of education and then go and pick up a gun? And then we invest in economic opportunity. When I was a kid in Bronzeville, my mother would send us to West Inglewood every weekend, every summer, every winter break, every spring break, to get us out of the slum we lived in and into a working class neighborhood where we wouldn't get into trouble. Now they're all black, both of them are all black neighborhoods. But one of them was filled with a lot of violence, and another one was entirely peaceful. What was the difference? Everybody in West Inglewood worked. Everybody had a job. My grandparents, my grandfather worked at Consolidated Freightways, grandmother worked at Michael Reese Hospital, my friend down the street, father worked for the railroad across the street, the lady I would eventually marry, her father worked for Acme Steel, and her mother worked for Grace Chemical. Everybody had a job. We know how to solve the violence problem. We just don't have an administration that's willing to do anything about it. That'll change what means you're mayor. And so violence actually encompasses so many things as the one I started with. But we also know how to create a great school system. I just happen to have been the principal of the #1 school in the city of Chicago. I know a little something. If there's anything I'm going to get right, it's our school system. And that'll be... And even if that's the only thing I ever got right, that'll be one more right thing than what we have right now. Right, you invest in the professional development of your staff. You invest in ensuring everybody gets a rich curriculum. You create a great culture and climate. Bam! Good school system. But it all takes investments. Investments that this administration is not willing to make. We currently have the worst, most understaffed school system in Illinois. We rank 857 out of 858 school districts. 857 out of 858. You know what that means? I forget the name of it. It's a good one. I had it on the tip of my tongue. It starts with an S. It's downstate. But, I mean, we're virtually the worst staffed school district in the state.
St. Louis.
What does that look like for real? That means that the average school district in Illinois with 600 kids has 59 staff members. The average school in Chicago with 600 kids has 37 staff members. That's 22 fewer staff for the same number of children. That's what we're dealing with in Chicago. And those 22 staff members all performed a service. One might have been a nurse. Two more might have been counselors to help children deal with their social emotional problems. 10 of them may have been teachers to help reduce class size so kids could get individualized attention. Another may have been a dean of students, or maybe even 2 people serving violence interruption. Doing violence interruption services depending upon the neighborhood they lived in. All of them are gone. Right? With me as mayor, that's going to change. Yeah, we're not going to be the worst staff. We're going to be one of the best staff. We're going to get kids the services they need. And that means investment. How are you going to pay for that, Troy? How are you going to pay for that? I'm gonna make a phone call. I hear you. It's simple to me. Tax the rich. Everybody's afraid to say it. They'll say it's like, well, we need progressive revenue. You know what progressive revenue means? Tax the rich. That's what it means. And so we can have a great school system. And we're going to have a great school system. I was talking to Damon Pollard today. He was a friend of mine from college. He had to leave early. He said, I believe in Chicago. I believe in the Chicago that can be from the Chicago that is. I believe we can take us from where we are to where we can be. And he said, and I believe you can lead that effort. And I'm telling you, I believe I can lead it only if I have you with me. Because we have two powers that are in operation here. The power of organized money. That's the power behind our mayor. That's the power behind most of the aldermen in our city council. Organized money. And you can only defeat that power with the power of organized people. And that doesn't mean you just organize to put me in office. It means you organize to stick with me once I'm in office. You have to have a candidate who understands that. And believe me, I understand. I'll say another thing I believe we can have is economic development. I believe we can. Number one, I think it actually starts, people always start with the private sector. I think it starts with the public sector. Because there used to be 40,000 teachers. Now there are 30,000. That's 10,000 people who no longer receive a paycheck, who are no longer in neighborhoods spending money in businesses, and those businesses are now gone because they had to shut down, and then the people they employed are now gone and unemployed because their businesses weren't supported with public dollars. So that's where I started. So when we go from 22 less staff to adequate staff, that means spending $1 billion more on staffing. Right? And that's 10,000 more people with $1 billion in their pocket to spend in your neighborhoods. That's number one. Then we look at the private sector. Let's look at TIF dollars and how TIF dollars are invested. I have a test. I call it the Ferris wheel test. This is the Ferris wheel test. Our current mayor has something called the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. And it's opportunity, it's a press opportunity. It's a photo opportunity. But it's not opportunity for us. You know how much money, first of all, you know how much money they spent on the Ferris wheel in Navy Pier? TIF dollars. $55 million. $55 million on one project in Navy Pier. Guess how much money they spent in the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund so far this year on the entire South and West Sides? $11 million. They spent 5 times more on one project in Navy Pier than on the entire South and West Sides of Chicago. Right? Under my leadership, that's going to flip. With not just the Navy Pier, they spent hundreds of millions downtown, period. And under my leadership, that's going to flip. We're going to spend hundreds of millions, and over the course of 4 years, billions of dollars in our neighborhoods, and let downtown develop itself with its own private money. And I think I'll close by dealing with, I think, the biggest issue we face. It is the issue at the heart of all of the others. Can anyone take a guess? That's actually in there. I'm thinking of something else. Yes.
Corruption.
Woo! Say that again. What is corruption? What is corruption?
It's diabolical. Undermine.
You know. He's a little shy. That's it. Give that brother a hand. Corruption. Now, what do we mean by that? It means that I'm not going to make the investments in schools that need to be made if I'm taking money from vulture capitalists who make money when schools fail because they then get to come in and privatize them.
Absolutely.
I can't invest in schools if I'm spending $340 million on a privatized custodial service and using school dollars to do it, a service that then left our schools filthy but then gave the mayor a $250,000 campaign contribution. That's corruption. We have an administration that takes money to do the dealings of the people he's taking money from. And as a result of that, can't possibly invest that money in our schools. Economic development. We need jobs. One of the things that creates jobs are the manufacturing zones. Well, we have a mayor who's actually allowed residential development to encroach upon the manufacturing zones. Why does he do that? Oh, does it happen to have anything to do with the fact that he takes money from real estate developers who profit from residential development that doesn't create jobs and gives them our public dollars to do so? Right? That's corruption. And so what does that affect? That affects our ability to have affordable housing, number one, and it also affects our ability to create jobs. We can't do either one if we're taking money from people who benefit from the lack of affordable housing or benefit when you take manufacturing zones out of the picture so you can create luxury residential housing. Corruption is the root of all of our problems. And what I say is, you can boil that down into a two-sided statement. The first statement is, we suffer from having elected officials who, at the drop of a hat, will sacrifice the public good for private gain. What we need is an elected official with a record of sacrificing his own private gain for the benefit of the public good. And there is no candidate in this race that has that record the way I do. I was the first and only principal to speak out against Barbara Byrd Bennett's corrupt soups contract. I was the first and only principal to speak out against the Aramark contract back in 2014. I was the first and only principal to not only speak out against charters, but do the research to prove that our neighborhood schools got better growth from their kids than the charters got from their kids. And I did this all when I served underneath Rahm Emanuel, subject to removal at any moment. Even after they gave me a warning resolution saying, stop it or you'll be fired, the next day I was at it again. I was a one-man better government association. Now I'm about to do that on my own. Imagine what I can do with you behind me. Imagine what we can do together. I mean that. And I'll end this on this. We put our hopes in people, in candidates. There's the power of organized money. I've said this in the beginning. And there's the power of organized people.
That's right.
I need you. When Harold got elected, what happened? He was not able to get a lot done because he didn't get the city council. Now I want y'all to follow me here. This is very important. People talk about the mayor's office like, you ever heard this saying, this argument, it's supposed to be a strong city council, but we have a strong mayor. That our government was designed to have a strong city council, but somehow we have a strong mayor and a weak city council. How did that happen? It's the wrong argument. We don't have a strong mayor. We don't have a strong city council. We don't have a weak mayor. We don't have a weak city council. What we have is the power of organized money behind both of them. And so if we, like the organized money just decided that it's better to run their agenda through the mayor's office because it's more efficient. It's one man. And then he can put everybody else in line with our money. And if they lose the mayor's office, guess what's going to happen? They're going to run their agenda through the city council. The same thing happened when Harold Washington was elected. They lost the mayor's office, so they started to run their agenda through Ed Berdoliak and Ed Burke. Does that make sense? The power of organized money was the center of power all the time.
Always.
And we can only defeat the power of organized money with the power of organized people. And so I need you all to organize with us, to get us in and to stay organized, to ensure that if we don't get 26 aldermen, we can pick up a phone, send out a text message, send out an email, and that alderman that doesn't want to vote for that ordinance that's going to help prevent violence or help our schools or create economic opportunity gets 10,000 phone calls that day, gets 1,000 people in front of his office banging on his door, letting him know if you don't vote the right way, we're going to be on you day in and day out. The power of organized people, along with the power of the mayor's office. That is what's going to help us renew our city, create a vision for our city, like take our vision for our city and make it real through the city council and through the mayor's office. Organized people. Are you all willing to be a part of that movement? Are you all willing to be a part of that movement? Give yourselves a hand. That movement starts today. That movement starts today. And it really picks up on August 28th when it's time for petitions. Because you don't get on the ballot if you don't get the right number of signatures. The signatures are 12,500. They say you need to get triple that. We're trying to get 6 times that. We want to get 75,000 signatures. And we need you going door to door. Everybody in here knocking your neighbors door to door to get us on that ballot. But I want you to see the connection between going door to door and building that movement. Because one day you're going door to door and you're convincing them to sign a petition. And they're getting to know you and you're getting to know them. The next day you might go to that same door to get them to come out to an event to push for a specific ballot initiative. The next day you might go to that same door. You're building the kind of relationship that creates the movement we're going to need once we're in office. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you with me?
Yes.
All right, let's make it happen. Thank you. Who's next? Somebody's supposed to take the microphone with me. I believe.